Yeah, welcome. And just before we kick off, just some housekeeping. So the session is being recorded. If everyone can have their videos off and mute their lines, that would be very useful. It just makes it a lot easier to hear the recording. And then in terms of why we are holding this vote, so obviously the Co-op is a democratic organisation, and whilst the Co-op directors and Ripple seek to make sort of operational decisions, there are some decisions that simply need to be voted on. So, particularly because in order to apply for a CFD, there would need to be a change in the Co-op rules. So therefore, this indicative vote is being held to see if a sort of formal vote needs to be had. But yeah, this is a democratic process, and it's really, really important that we give you the option of holding a vote, and we felt that, as Ripple and as the directors, to not ask members if they wanted the opportunity to be for the Co-op funded share to be part of the CFD application. We didn't think that was a decision that we should make ourselves. We really, really felt that that was we were kind of beholden to hold a vote. Now, this is an informal meeting, so the vote will close at 8 o'clock. What I'll do is I'll run through the sort of overview of how CFDs work and the process for applying for a CFD. If you want to ask questions, please do so. On your screen, you should be able to see a menu at the bottom that says more. It's got 3 dots on it. If you click on that and then you click on chat, you can then ask a question in chat, but we're expecting quite a few questions. So before you write in a question, please check if somebody else has asked a similar question and then upvote that other question rather than just having lots and lots of the same question. We'll be answering the questions that have got the most upvotes first, just so we can prioritise the questions as best as possible. And please don't post anonymously, so you can put in your name and then we can know sort of who's asked the question. And then, as I said, the vote will be closing at 8 o'clock. So please get your emails ready. You'll have a separate email, not from Ripple. It will be from Choice Voting. Get that email ready now. If you haven't got an email link, please email help@rippleenergy.com and we can send you your voting link. But do that now so you're ready, rather than scrabbling around just before 8 o'clock, because there would obviously be a risk that you would miss votes in that situation. So get ready to vote now if you haven't done so already. Obviously, lots and lots of people have already voted, which is fantastic. But yeah, if you haven't yet voted and you're planning to vote, get it all ready now so that there's no hold-ups before you in casting your vote. So why are you being asked to vote on this issue? Well, as I said, Derril Water, like all co-ops, is a democratic body, and so major decisions are made by the members. And we obviously seek to reduce to make as many operational decisions as possible, but whether or not to join a CFD or not is a sufficiently significant point that would need to be put to the members. So this indicative vote is on whether or not you want the Co-op funded share of Derril Water Solar Park to be included in an application for a CFD. Now, as a member of the Co-op, you've got 1 vote, regardless of how many watts of the solar park you own. Every single member has 1 vote, as like any good democratic organisation. So yeah, if you're a member, you have 1 vote and your vote counts equally alongside every single other member of the Co-op. Now, so in terms of the actual vote, so if the Co-op decides to apply for a CFD and is successful in securing one in an auction, that would remove the link between wholesale power prices and members' savings rate. So you would no longer be able to expect higher saving rates when wholesale prices were higher and lower saving rates when wholesale prices were lower. So your savings would be relatively static over the 15-year duration of the CFD. Now, whether or not the level of savings under a CFD would be greater or less than the savings that would be achieved in the market, we simply cannot say, because we do not know what the electricity price is going to be. That's only something we can find out 15 years down the line. So we can't say whether it will be better or worse. it's simply not known, but we can share what some of the government's forecasts are, but forecasts change all the time. So yeah, there's considerable uncertainty over the latest government's forecasts. Now, a really quick introduction to CFDs then. So CFDs are basically the government's main way of subsidising renewable energy projects. They want a lot of renewable energy projects to come forward, and so they seek to reduce the risk for primarily for project finance projects. So they reduce the risk by offering more stable revenues, and that is then hoped to bring more projects forward. And there's about to be an auction. So the application for the auction closes on Friday, and then, or the application for the CFD process closes on Friday. There will then potentially be an auction later in the summer, depending on how many people apply for a CFD and whether or not there's enough budget to fund all of the CFDs that are applied for. Also, another bit of background is the energy price forecasts have fallen over the last 6 months or so. So, you know, obviously we're coming out of a period of very, very high energy prices. And also another thing to be aware of is the government is currently consulting on potentially changing the way that energy prices are derived across Great Britain, and this creates some uncertainty over longer term electricity price forecasts. However, for Derril, we don't know, there's still a lot of uncertainty over whether or not prices will be broken up into different regions or not. So it's not definite this is happening. If it did happen, it is possible that Derril, being located in the southwest of England, could be in a price area that is higher than the average price in the UK. So in which case, if Derril was outside a CFD, it could potentially get a higher level of value of electricity than other projects, for example, those in the north of Scotland. So a CFD based on current government electricity price forecast could potentially, we don't know whether it will or not, but could potentially deliver greater savings than would be secured under a market price. But in terms of the general impact, so there's a lot to think about with a CFD, but generally, if you think about whether you would prefer to have more stable savings over a 15-year period, or you would want to have more stable electricity prices. Those are the two kind of different options. So with a CFD, you get more stable level of savings. This means you can have more visibility over, what your payback period might be, because you can know roughly what your level of savings would be over a 15-year period. Under a market price basis, you don't know what the price is going to be next year, let alone in 5 or 10 years. It might be higher, it might be lower. And without a CFD, you don't have protection from price spikes. So at the moment, if prices increase, like we've seen over the last couple of years, you could expect your level of savings to increase. So like for Greg Bather, electricity prices went up, and members of Greg Bather saw the savings that they got from that project increase significantly as well. Now that prices have come down, the level of savings have come down as well. With a CFD, you would not have that level of protection from volatile prices. If the price went up, your bill would go up, but your level of savings would remain pretty stable. Another thing to consider is the CFD is a subsidy mechanism. Now, we're really, really proud that Ripple is a kind of subsidy-free mechanism, and it's a way for building renewables without the need for any subsidies. Obviously, if the co-op funded share of Derril secured a CFD, that would then remove the CFD freeness of the Ripple model. That's not necessarily something that needs to concern members. One thing I should point out is that we are lobbying for, as an energy consumer, all of you members will be paying for these subsidies anyway. What we are lobbying for is for, if you get your electricity from your own unsubsidised wind farm or solar park, that you would be exempt from paying to subsidise somebody else's wind farm or solar park that you can't be getting electricity from because you're getting it from your own unsubsidised project. So we don't know whether or not that will be successful, but by this co-op opting for or applying for a CFD for the co-op funded share, it would obviously massively weaken that argument, because the co-op funded share would be getting subsidies. So it's a bit of an esoteric point, but I do want to kind of make it clear that there are, or there could potentially be implications for for that as well. So in terms of how CFDs work, so with a CFD, it's all about the strike price. Now, the strike price is you bid in for what strike price you want. That's effectively like the contract price. And if the wholesale electricity price is below that level, you get topped up to that level. If the market price, and this is the day ahead price, if the market price is higher, it's assumed that you're getting that higher revenue, so you have to pay back the difference because you've said you only need a certain level and you're getting more than that, so you pay it back. So on the graph here, you can see the green area is the sort of top up that you would get. This is made up graph numbers, they're the shape of the graph, but just to illustrate the point. So if the price, which is the green line, is lower than that purple line, which is the strike price, the green area is the bit that the project would receive as that sort of extra revenue compared to what it would get in the market. The red area is funds that it would have to pay back. So if it was under the market price, it would be getting that, but under a CFD, it has to pay it all back again. Now, projects bid into an auction and the lowest price projects win. So basically the government stacks up all the applications or all the bids that it gets for CFD applications, and then it says, right, okay, you're the cheapest, we can afford you, oh, and we can afford that one, and we can afford that one, but this one breaks the budget. So everything that bid higher than that price doesn't get a CFD. Everyone that bid lower, they get it. So it's a competitive auction. The more competitive, more projects that are in there, you would expect the you know, that kind of push prices down. So the auction might settle at lower prices. CFDs themselves are index linked. So this means, and they're index linked using the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. So if CPI increases, that means the strike price would be increased every year according to what CPI is. I should also point out that some people may have seen previous CFD prices. For some reason, well, it's not for some reason, all CFDs are priced in 2012 prices. This is so that you can compare, you know, a nuclear CFD issued in 2012 with an offshore wind CFD that was issued in 2015 with an onshore wind CFD that was issued in 2022, so that you can compare between different CFDs that are awarded at different times. They kind of do it all in 2012 prices. And then you need to just inflate everything back up. So all the numbers that I present today will be in 2024 prices, ignoring the fact that it goes back to, we've kind of already inflated it. So that it's just, there might be an inconsistency with what you might read in the press or elsewhere with kind of the prices that have been achieved in the auctions. You have to inflate them into current prices. So as you can see, with a CFD, basically your level of savings, as I said, is much more stable. So your level of savings is basically effectively the difference between the CFD's strike price and the operating cost of the wind farm. So here on this graph, we've just added in sort of imaginary OPEX price. And as you can see, the level of savings is that purple or grey bar. Your level of savings is relatively, or is stable, regardless of what's happening with the electricity price. Whereas without a CFD, you would expect lower savings when the electricity market price is lower and higher savings when the wholesale price increased. So as we said, the key thing with the CFD is it breaks the link between wholesale electricity prices and your level of savings. So with a CFD, you would not have higher savings when prices are higher and lower savings when prices are low. It will be much, much more stable over the 15-year lifetime or duration of the contract. Now, as I said, market prices have fallen recently. You know, we've just been through an energy price crisis, but this shows you, this is Ofgem, the government electricity regulators publishes weekly electricity price forecast. You can see each purple dot is where we or when we fix the grey weather prices. So you can see the first dot on the left hand side, we fixed it just before prices really started to increase with the electricity or the energy crisis. So that led to about 9.7 pence per kilowatt hour saving. Then obviously prices were a lot higher when we fixed it in year 2. That led to us 27 pence per kilowatt hour saving. Then since then, prices have come not right down, but they've come down quite a way. And that meant that in year 3, the level of saving is about 6.5 pence per kilowatt hour. So obviously Great Weather hasn't got a CFD, so it it has had higher savings when the prices have been higher and lower savings when prices have been lower. With the CfD, that gets broken and you would have a far more stable level of savings over the duration of the 15-year duration of the contract. So some key things to consider. So the timeline, as I said, applications close on Friday. There's an auction in the summer, and the contract lasts from April 2026 to April 2041. So the first, what was it, two years, or nearly 2 years of generation would be just under the normal market price before the CfD kicks in, and then it would kick in from 2026 for 15 years. The maximum bid that you can bid into the CfD auction is about £85 per megawatt hour. Last year, the strike price for solar was about £65 per megawatt hour, but that was an increase of about 30% compared to the previous year. Now, so as I said, with CFDs, it all kind of, not all, but the strike price is really, really important. So here you can see we've just shown green, the horizontal green line is the CFD strike price, and then the 3 different purple lines are the government's electricity price forecast. So the top purple line is the high forecast, the sort of solid line is the central, and the dotted line is the low. So you can see at the maximum bid price for a CfD for solar, that would be, which is the green line, that is higher than all of those government electricity price forecasts. So this would lead to a saving of around 6.5 pence per kilowatt hour if it wasn't a very competitive auction and the price settled at the maximum possible price. Now, if we looked at the last year's price, so this was around £65 per megawatt hour. So we've moved the green line down to reflect that. I should also add this includes like REGO value, so it's not exactly at 65. At that level, the CfD would deliver kind of greater levels of savings than most of the low and the central forecast, but the high government electricity price forecast would be higher than the CfD price after about 2034 onwards. So it's kind of a more marginal thing. In some years it's higher, in some years it's lower than the CfD price. Now, if it was a more competitive auction and prices settled at about £57 per megawatt hour, not kilowatt hour, here you can see that's lower than the high in nearly all of the years. So it'd be lower than that high scenario. And in the central years, it's lower than the market price in some years, and it's higher than the market price in other years. In the low, it's still higher than the low price forecast in most of the years of the contract. Now, obviously, the energy price crisis that we've just gone through is very, very front and centre of people's minds. If there was another energy price crisis like the one we've just been through over the last couple of years, and this is the orange line reflects that. This is a scenario that we've made up. This is not a government forecast. We have just done this to illustrate a potential scenario. It's not based on any modelling at all. It's just to illustrate what an energy price crisis might look like in terms of wholesale prices. So if you had another energy price crisis where wholesale prices spiked, then during that crisis, and then fell down to kind of return to more normal levels after 4 or 5 years, during that energy price crisis, it's likely that the CfD would deliver significantly less value than you would get in the market. So you'd have prices would be really high, but the level of your savings from your CfD would not increase. So they'd be really, really static. So in that situation, or certainly during an energy price crisis, it's likely, not impossible, but it's likely that the CfD would deliver significantly less value than operating in the market would do. But like I said, this is Ripple's illustration rather than based on any kind of modelling or what have you. So in terms of some key details, so like I said, the applications close on the 19th of April, there's an auction, and the contract period runs from 2026 to 2041. Maximum strike price for solar is £85, which is about 8.5 pence a kilowatt hour. Last year, the price closed at £66 a megawatt hour, 65, which is about 6.6 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, some things to be aware of. So even if the co-op decides, yes, we want the co-op share to be applied for a CFD, we do not know whether or not we're going to be successful. So just deciding to do it doesn't guarantee that we would get a CFD. But also it's really critical to remember that we can't say, if we decide to bid into a CFD, we can't say, oh, we're going to bid in X or Y price, because it's a really competitive auction. And if we were disclosing what our bids would be, that would be considered anti-competitive, and we could get in really serious trouble for doing that. So we wouldn't be able to say what bid level we intend to bid into the CFD auction at ahead of the auction, because that just is not it's a massive no-no. So in terms of this vote, this is an informal vote, indicative vote. It is on whether or not you want the co-op funded share to be included in the application for a CFD. So the part of Derril that is funded by a bank finance facility, that the board has decided that will bid in for a CFD, that the whole of the CFD mechanism is kind of designed to enable projects that have got project finance to get built, essentially. So it makes sense for the share of the project that is funded by the bank facility to bid in. So this indicative vote is for whether or not you want the co-op funded share to be included in the application as well. And then if that was, and there would need to be a 75% majority, which is similar to what would be needed in a kind of formal co-op vote as well. So, yeah, this vote is on whether or not you want the co-op funded portion of Derril, which is approximately half of Derril, to be also included in that application. Now, remember, as I said, voting for a CFD does not mean we will be guaranteed to get one. It's a competitive auction. We can't say what price it would be, and yet it would have to be kind of all the co-op. We can't have members saying, oh, I want to be in the co-op, and other members saying, I don't want to be in the not in the co-op. I want to be in the CFD, or I don't want to be in the CFD. It's kind of the whole of that co-op share is kind of either in or out. There is a little bit depending on the kind of split between different inverters in the project, but it's very, very teeny weeny. But yeah, so the whole co-op share kind of has to be in or out. We can't have sort of bits in and bits out. So I think, yeah, so when you're voting, things you might want to consider is essentially it comes down to, do you want more stable, predictable levels of savings with more visibility of your payback period and protection from low prices? Or do you want more stable bills, protection from not protection, the ability to benefit from high prices? So if there's another energy price crisis, you could potentially benefit from that. And do you want sort of subsidy-free savings? So it's kind of stable savings versus stable bills. That's kind of the two, I think that's the easiest way of kind of comparing the two different scenarios. But we do not know, we cannot say whether or not being in a CFD or out of a CFD, which would deliver greater value, essentially, because, you know, we can see the government electricity price forecast. We do not know, you know, they change all the time. We don't know whether or not they will come to pass, or whether or not they'll be changed and they'll be sort of out of date very soon. So it's more about whether you as a member want more stable levels of savings or more stable electricity bills. So I think, yeah, that's the end there. So I'll stop sharing, and then we've got quite a few questions coming through. Simon, are you?
Sarah, I'm here to help. I'm the guy that's been switching people's videos off when they've been coming on. Oh, there's the speak of the devil. There we go, Paul. Stop video. So, Sarah, I'll just work way through the questions as they came in. The first one was, you know, why is Ripple? Well, why is the co-op borrowing money from the bank for Derril Water?
Oh, this is going right back to the first question and answer it.
Oh.
I can see. So there we go.
In terms of the bank finance, so, you know, having bank finance helps. It gives us flexibility when we're doing a share offer, so that if we, you know, we don't necessarily know exactly how much funds we're going to raise, and it enables us to get by being able to fund bigger projects tend to be cheaper. So it means that the co-op gets access to cheaper, bigger and cheaper projects so that you can save more of your electricity bills in general. So in general, with energy, scale is really, really important. Bigger projects are so much cheaper than smaller projects. And by having debt finance in there, it means that we can get into bigger projects, which delivers greater savings for members.
And more carbon savings, of course, more green
Well,
power
absolutely.
being generated. There was a
And I
question.
should say, the bank doesn't own that share. The co-op owns the entire of Derril Water. So once that finance facility is repaid, the co-op owns all of, well, I mean, it owns all of it anyway, but it kind of gets all of the electricity. So you then get basically enhanced levels of value over the 40-year lifetime of the project. So yeah, there are many reasons why it makes sense to have bank finance in projects.
So there's a question here as to how does a CFD differ from an interest rate swap? So my view is that, well, CFDs are designed specifically for the renewable energy industry. For us at Ripple, what we've always been keen to do is to use existing contracts, existing things out there, but use them in a novel way to deliver the Ripple model. So, we use well understood technologies like solar and onshore wind. The contracts that we put in place are very standard. If we were to use something like an interest rate swap, which I've not been familiar within the renewables industry, I think that would be adding a little bit more novelty to the Ripple projects than we would want to. But is there anything you'd add to that?
Well, I think an interest rate swap, and you can get exchange rate swaps, and I think there's even spread betting swaps you can get as well. It's just that's a different. They're kind of, risk ways to kind of mitigate financial risk in financial markets. CFDs, this kind of CFD is very much focused on enabling big infrastructure projects like wind farms and solar parks to be built, and the assumption is that they've got kind of project finance, and it reduces the level of risk that project finance faces, because you've got very stable revenues. And if you're building a £1 or £2 billion offshore wind farm, often you would rather have a lower but more stable level of revenues than more volatile prices in general. For project finance projects aren't as attractive as much more stable levels of revenue for, and so that's why, and I think you shouldn't think about it as a kind of difference to a financial swap or a sort of financial CFD. The whole thing is designed around in order to get more renewables onto the grid. And nearly every single wind farm, and well, apart from the ones that were funded under the renewables obligation, nearly every single offshore wind farm is funded via the CFD mechanism now.
I knew the economists would have a view on that one. Would the returns for members be treated differently on a tax basis just because it's via a CFD? I think from my view, the savings would be passed to members in exactly the same way as via the existing mechanism. It's just that we would use that variable OPEX element there to create that true up, so that the members were getting the effective value of the CFD. But yeah, I don't know, Sarah, anything, any other thoughts there?
In terms of,
would members' savings be treated differently in a tax sense just because of the CFD?
Not in a tax sense. So the only I mentioned about the fact that obviously the CFD is a subsidy, and we are lobbying for an exemption from levies for our members, because at the moment part of your bill is basically paying for all these CFD subsidies and other subsidies, and we're arguing that our members, they're getting their electricity from an unsubsidized wind farm or solar park, So they shouldn't have to pay levies so that their neighbour can get some subsidised renewables, because they've kind of sorted themselves out. And so, you know, they're basically like double counting or double paying. And we don't think that's fair. Now, we don't know whether or not we would be successful in our lobbying, and there would be an exemption. If there was an exemption, that would reduce your bills. Again, potentially this is massively, massively uncertain. But if the co-op's share did get a CfD, it kind of, we can't argue anymore that you shouldn't be, that you're double paying, because you're getting subsidies and you're paying for them as well. So it would massively reduce the likelihood of us being able to secure an exemption from energy levies for our members. But we do not know whether or not we would be successful in getting that exemption anyway, kind of thing. But it does, the fact that Ripple is a subsidy-free mechanism for funding renewables, you know, we've got, at the moment, we've got a really, really strong case to say all of our members are double paying for subsidies, because they're paying for these subsidies and they're not getting anything in return for these subsidies. So therefore they shouldn't pay for them. They're doing, you know, they're building a solar park and they're still paying for somebody else's electricity to be subsidized. So we've got a very strong argument at the moment, and that argument would be much, much weaker if the co-op's share got a CfD. But like I said, we don't know. The strength of that argument doesn't necessarily mean we would win it and you would get an exemption. But if you did get an exemption, then you could expect a reduction, a further reduction in your bills, like above what the saving rate would be, which would be the exemption rate. But it's massively uncertain as to whether, you know, we are not saying you would be losing out on that, because we don't know whether you'd be getting it in the first place. But it would certainly weaken our ability to lobby for that.
And do you have a sense as to whether government's paying out or getting money in via CFDs at the moment?
So in general, they've been, government's been paying out, and this is why people are paying levies to create the funds to pay out. Obviously, in the energy price crisis, when prices were really high, then some money did flow back, because obviously market prices were really high and the level of subsidy, you know, often the market price was higher than the strike prices, in which case people were paying back. But also because generally earlier CFDs were kind of at a higher price, so the CFD strike prices have come down. Obviously, the higher ones that are at very high prices, that there would have been less payback. But in general, there was they were kind of paying back. But in general, the government or the, you know, consumers have been paying into the scheme, not getting money out of it.
Yeah. And there's a question about the interaction of the CFD and project finance, and how the CFD might affect costs in general, which I can take. CFD won't affect the costs to build the solar park in any way, nor will it affect the programme. For the finance proportion of the generation, if there's a CFD relating to that, then it reduces the uncertainty for the bank, so it makes the bank finance a little bit cheaper, because they can reduce the debt service ratios, because they feel it's been de-risked to a degree. So it does make sense for the finance proportion very much. So that is what is being done for the project. So the bank finance proportion will be bidding in for the CFD, because as Sarah says, that's really specifically what a CFD is designed for. It's there to reduce the cost of capital.
Yep, fantastic. So
I was just going to ask while you're scrolling there. So Sarah, why 75% for this vote? Why not a simple majority?
So the co-op rules say that any change to the co-op rules requires a 75% majority vote from the members. So you know, the co-op rules are kind of like the foundations upon which the whole co-op rests and operates. So any change to the rules requires, you know, an overwhelming majority in order for that to happen. You know, and I think people are if there's not an overwhelming majority of feeling from members that they want this to happen, then it simply won't happen. And yeah, it's just that is what is required in a CFD, and not in a CFD, in a co-op vote to change the rules. So yeah, and the board would require a similar level of strength of feeling in this indicative vote in order to decide to hold a formal vote as well. So yeah, and it's a democratic process. We keep coming back to that, and a fundamental change to the rules. It's only a slight word change, but it does obviously, have a big impact on, on the kind of mechanics of how the co-op works. It is only right and proper that has a very, very high threshold for a change to take effect.
That's right, and we felt that, albeit we'd only be proposing one word change pretty much in the rules, we felt that the change of the sort of trading basis for the co-op's proportion of the power was a significant enough difference from what people signed up to in the first place that we wanted to have a very clear steer that this is what the co-op really wanted to do.
And we're not kind of recommending this change happens. It's just that there is this opportunity because the portion that's funded by the bank facility is will be bidding in, and we didn't feel it was right if we kind of applied for the bank funded portion, but we didn't even mention it to the rest of the co-op members that there is this potential opportunity that they might want to get involved with. So we're not saying we think they should or they shouldn't, but we're just raising it as a potential option if they want to. But yeah, we felt that to not mention it would have been us not doing our jobs properly.
That's it. And there's a few questions have come up about stabilization. I know you've touched on that in your slides, but a question came in fairly early on, I admit, but stabilizing generation price via CFD, but can one stabilize one's consumption price for 15 years? The answer is that, well, that's what the Ripple model seeks to do, that you're exposed to the wholesale price volatility in your bills, and if you take that volatility in the generation value, then you create a stabilization effect in that way. But as Sarah says, the CFD opportunity is one where you can stabilize your revenue from the project, and it may be at a price that ends up being an improvement on what one might get on the wholesale market. But Sarah, there's been quite a few questions about, prices and where we would bid in at and how we would make that decision.
So yeah, I think we can't say what any numbers, but I think we wouldn't. There's no floor to what you bid. You could bid in £5, £10. We wouldn't bid in at a level that we didn't want to win. I think that's probably the fairest way, and that we think people wouldn't be happy with. So I think in terms of a crazy low bid, hoping that it clears above you, that wouldn't be what we'd be aiming to do. We would bid in at a price that we were happy and comfortable to win at that price, rather than expecting it. In the very first round, this is way back, there were some solar projects that bid in very low, expecting it to clear at a higher price, and it kind of didn't. So yeah, we would bid in at a price that we wanted to win.
And how does winter versus summer pricing impact one's bid strategy?
In terms of, in a kind of perfect market with perfect foresight, you would expect a price you get for a year to be to take account of in general, you'd expect prices to be lower in the summer, higher in the winter, because there's more consumption in the winter, less in the summer. In a perfect well with perfect foresight, an annual price would reflect the fact that over that 12 months, some of it's going to be in low price periods, some of it's going to be in high price periods. So it shouldn't make like a huge difference compared to, you know, and again, in theory, with perfect foresight, you know, aggregation of 365 day ahead prices should be the same as an annual price with, albeit there's a bit of risk for fixing on an annual basis, but yeah, you know, with perfect foresight, it should be identical. Obviously, in reality, that there's not perfect foresight kind of thing, so it shouldn't make a huge amount of difference. I think with a CFD, so CFDs don't pay out if the price is negative, but if the price is low, then it obviously there's a big amount that it fills up to. So if prices were lower in the summer, then there would be a bigger gap that the CFD would be filling up. But you know, likewise in the winter, if prices were higher, it may be that it's paying back out again. So yeah, it's there's not a very obvious clear answer to that, I think.
So, and if I may, there's a few sort of general CFD questions that I could sort of mop up, and I suppose the point that I would always make is it is a competitive auction. As Sarah says, you know, one could bid as low as one likes, and other bidders will take their views of summer and winter pricing into account, and they will bid at a level that they think will give them a net benefit, and part of that benefit will be the reduced cost of capital via the lenders, because the CFD kind of de-risks the revenue for lenders. Now, CFD stuff, somebody's asked, has Ripple done a CFD application before? Yes, I have. I have bid in for a CFD in the past and was successful in doing so. Note that the minimum capacity for bidding into a CFD is 5 megawatts, hence why Greg Vada didn't go there. And you know, the question as to whether if Ripple is you know, has advised that the co-op, the bank share of the powers traded via CFD, it doesn't necessarily mean that we think that is going to be a better financial outturn or higher value for the bank. It is exactly as we say, it's that stable revenue for the bank. It de-risks it, and that way, you know, we're not, you don't have the wholesale price volatility for the bank's share of the power. Wholesale price volatility is a different question for you, the co-op members, who are consumers. The bank is not a consumer of power, well, not certainly not for its lending proportion. So it's a very different proposition. So simply because we're suggesting or recommending that an application for the bank proportion is submitted to apply for a CFD doesn't mean that we are recommending the same for the co-op. It is up to the members to decide.
Exactly. I should add that the vote closes in 15 minutes, just as a final warning. So please, if you are going to vote and you haven't, just vote now, because yeah, otherwise you would risk whatever, not opening the emails in time and missing out on your opportunity to vote. Fabulous.
So I can just add, and then so in terms of the CFD counterparty, so that is a body called the Low Carbon Contracts Company, so that's LCCC, and they manage the whole thing. So there's also another body called the EMR delivery body, but yeah, generally the contracts are with LCCC.
Yeah. What else have we got here? So what would, so people are asking what we have personally voted for, and you know, that's we can't kind of say, you know, we wouldn't want, and that simply the board members wouldn't want to be you know, considered to be giving financial advice to members. This is, you know, up to you as individual co-op members, what you want to do, whether or not you would prefer to have more stable level of savings or more stable bills. That's the kind of key, the crux of it. So yeah, it's up to you, and yeah, we can't really disclose what we would have voted for kind of thing. This is not a kind of a recommendation that people do one thing or another. It is, it's a democratic process, and it's up to the members to decide what they want.
Okay, and then there's a couple of sort of general Derril Water project questions which I can field. So, are there plans for energy storage, so battery energy storage systems? No, not at this time. The planning application didn't make provision for batteries at Derril, so it's something that we would need to apply for. We've not done batteries with Ripple to date. It's something we are keen to get exposure to help complement and to supercharge the savings for members if there is such opportunity. It really depends, of course, on the capital costs versus the likely financial benefits of the battery. It's not a case of every time you put a battery on, it will deliver financial benefits. It's the battery market is, I understand, changing quite a lot. I think in the early days there was a lot of revenue available from flexibility or frequency services, and now that there's so many batteries out there, there's not quite so much demand for additional frequency services, albeit it's changing all the time with more renewables coming onto the grid. Then these things do change. It's something that we will keep an open mind on, and I guess the energy market is always changing, and if there's a clear opportunity out there, then it's something that we would seek to discuss it with the co-op board, and or if it was significant enough, then the members as well. But in terms of the project program, I can confirm that we have entered into the engineer procure construct contract, and we will be sending out an email later this week with all the details around that. I think everybody will be very happy, and the program is still got us energizing towards the end of the year, but we will continue to do our very best to improve on program, but there's always things out there, weather, grid companies, supply chain. We do our very best to deliver the project in good time for you. But like I say, an update later this week. There was a question as well about solar panel costs. We were fortunate that by the time we entered into the EPC contract, those panel costs reductions were able to be reflected in that. But then there were a whole load of other costs that had gone up as well. So it all sort of balanced itself out. But yeah, we were fortunate that the panel costs had not been committed prior to the reductions that happened in between the share offer and the signing of the contract.
Fabulous. And there's a question about project 4 as well. We can maybe just touch on that, although this is about Derril. So project 4 will be on the same basis as all the other projects, so it will not assume that there's going to be a CfD or anything. So if at a later point members want to, then we obviously can't bind the co-op to doing one thing, but it will not be the co-op rules will be exactly the same. Well, the co-op rules will be exactly the same as they are for Derril and for Kirkhill and Great Valor.
That's right.
Fantastic.
I don't see any other particular questions being put onto our spreadsheet on the side. I can see that people have been using the chat function to full effect, so thank you everybody for contributing there as well, and answering some of the questions that come in on our behalf. Now we've got another 10 minutes before the vote closes officially. It is an independent voting platform. We have no influence on that, so it will close when it closes, I'm afraid, and we have to then log in and yeah, harvest the details. So we've got a couple of people lined up on our side, so there'll be a double check to ensure that the numbers are correct as they add them up.
That's fantastic. I'm just going through this. Are there any other questions here that we haven't gone through? So there's that question just there. I just think about, would the strike price be the same for the bank funded portion and the co-op funded portion? So the project, yes, it would be. It's counted as a single project, and yeah, there would be a single strike price for the entire application kind of thing. So it wouldn't be, you could bid one level for one and another for another bit of the project. We would be putting in one bid for the one bid for the project, whether or not that covers half of it or all of it is kind of what's being said, but we wouldn't put in two different bids. And the way the auction works, as I said, it's the lowest price bids. They just stack up all the bids depending by strike price, and then they look at which they can afford to award a CFD to. Oh, and they can do another one and another one, and then anything that kind of breaks the budget then doesn't get a CFD. So it would be yeah, very complicated and unlikely to be successful if you yeah, did two other applications.
Here we go. And there were a few questions last night. I can see some related questions here in terms of the sequence of the CFD. So it might be useful, we can clarify. So what we would need to do is we submit the application to online before 5 p.m. on Friday. That then goes into a process whereby LCCC weigh up all the applications and see if it needs to go to an auction. If it needs to go to an auction, then bids need to be submitted by the end of May. And then I'm looking at my sheet here, by the end of June, the results are announced. So if there is no auction, then all the bids clear at the administrative strike price, which, any idea off the top of your head where the administrative strike price is this year, Sarah?
It was in one of my slides, if you're paying attention.
It would be quite high.
It's 85, I think, is
yeah, the likelihood of it clearing without an auction is very, very low. But you know, we would, so in all likelihood we would have then until the end of May to bid. But once you bid, then that's it. And because we very much expect Derril to have been fully commissioned by the time the next auction opens, then this is the only opportunity to do so. And it's interesting maybe to note that the way that we're able to bid in only part of Derril, should the co-op choose not to bid in its part, is because of a consultation that came out not that long ago that enables, is designed for co-location of assets. So because a lot of solar projects in particular may have batteries co-located with them, but they're all going through this one meter, then that kind of disrupts, as it were, the principle of a CFD, which is just to pay for renewable generation. Whereas when you have a co-located asset, well, you could be importing energy and then exporting it again, and the export is eligible for CFD, which is not what's intended. So the co-location consultation enables a more subtle or detailed metering arrangement, complex metering arrangement, so that only part of a project is eligible for CFD. So that's how we're able to put in for just the bank share, should that be what we end up doing. Alternatively, if the co-op chooses to bid its part in, then we just rely on the one export meter.
And there's a question about geography and what sounded like a CFD advantage for a wind farm in solar versus solar in Devon. So what I'm going to expand on it a bit more. So there's a consultation, and the government is taking. So at the moment, there's one electricity price for the whole of Great Britain, so England, Wales, and Scotland. And what the government is considering is breaking that up into 6, 7, or 8, I can't remember the number, but regions essentially. They were going to have like 200 or 300 nodes, but they've ditched that. So basically breaking the country up into different price zones, and then the electricity price in each zone would kind of be determined more by the demand and generation levels and transmission capacity and stuff within that zone and between the different zones. So instead of there being one price for the whole country, there would be 6, 7, or 8 different prices depending on where the projects were located. In general, you would expect to get slightly higher prices in the south, because that's where there's more consumption and there tends to be less generation. So it kind of, and the idea is that it acts as a signal to generation to be like, all right, you might get a higher price if you're in the south, so build a solar park in the south. Or if you're a consumer, to go up north, because you would then get cheaper electricity if you're away from the centre of consumption. So generally, you would expect prices to be slightly higher in the south and slightly lower in the north, so sort of north of England and in Scotland. So Kirkhill, the wind farm that's about to start generating, that's in Scotland. So that might, again, if this happens, we don't know that it's going to come forward, but if it did, and there's been some modelling, it could potentially be in a lower price zone. Whereas
2 minutes till the vote closes. 2 minutes, just.
And then whereas Derril, obviously Derril's in Devon in the south of England. So Derril, again, if it happens, we don't know. The zone that Derril is in could be a higher priced zone than if it was, you know, a solar park in Scotland, everything else being equal kind of thing. So it kind of depends on, it means that the value of the electricity from Derril may, under this regional proposal, be a little bit higher than Kirkhill might get being located in the south of Scotland. So it's just, you know, it's a very, very complex picture. We don't know, like I said, it's a consultation and a proposal at the moment. We don't know whether a change of government might change that, or even whether the current government would decide to progress it. They've already moved from the idea of having 200 or 300 different zones. That was seen as too complicated. Surprise, surprise. It was very, very complicated. They've kind of stopped that, but the I can't remember the number, 6, 7, or 8 zones is still on the table. But again, it's not definite that it's going to happen. And, you know, some people have sort of commented that it, you know, it makes it hard to make a decision. It definitely does make it hard. So, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty about, you know, not just the structure of electricity prices, but, you know, also over their level. And there are so many factors that influence electricity prices both up and down. So, yeah, it's a very...
A last question about, you know, the modelling that we do to inform the bid team and how we, the bid and what bid team that we would have, and then, how we address and assess risks with CFD approach. I think, as Sarah said before, you know, we would bid in at a level that, you know, we would think people be happy with. It's not a case of a CFD at any price. The other point to note is that it is unlikely that the bid submitted on behalf of, you know, for Derril Water would set the bid price. So there's no point in us trying to try and figure out what else is going to be bidding in and see if we can bid at a level that then sets the price, because there's so many other megawatts out there that will be going in. Instead, the bid would be on the basis that we think, you know, for our project alone gives good value. And yeah, so it's not a case of, you know, so there's consultants out there that will offer their services, but, you know, so to try and give you insights as to what other people will be bidding. But for Derril, it doesn't really matter what other people are bidding at, because we want to get a price that is best for Derril, rather than trying to be too strategic about it in relation to where we think other bids might be.
And we just had another question about the tax treatment. So and whether or not a CFD would affect, you know, whether or not members' savings are benefit from a tax relief or not. So and how's the lobbying going for that? So we've had a very clear no from the current government, so we are raising it with Labour, so that if Labour win the next election, they are aware of the issue. And you know, but we should point out that, you know, the Labour Party has a very strong they've got a local energy plan. You know, they have got community energy in their very strongly in their policy. They want to, it's called like crowding in, like community and public ownership. So they've got this GB Energy, it's not GB News, though, GB Energy, and you know, they want to use that to help get more you know, community and consumer owned, like publicly or people owned, household owned projects going forward. So, you know, we think there's a lot of expertise and knowledge that we can share with people, or share with the Labour Party. So we are, you know, actively trying to engage and make them aware that, you know, at the moment it's absolutely crazy that people have to pay or some people might have to pay taxes on their savings. Nothing else. There's no other situation in which you would pay tax on a saving. It's absolutely crazy. So yeah, we are having got a very, very clear no from the current government, we are turning our attention on to a potential Labour government.
So thank you, Philip. You have noted that the voting has closed. Behind the scenes, our colleagues are logging into the system. They are refreshing their screens to be able to get the results to be able to share with everybody. So we'll just sort of give them a moment to work through that process. So Abby, you've asked a question about next opportunity to apply for a CFD. There won't be one. By the time the next CFD auction happens, then Derril Water will have already been commissioned, and that will then mean that is no longer eligible. So yeah, if being commissioned means fully commercially operational. So that's why, you know, the opportunity is still there for Kirkhill, even though the turbines are up, it's not fully operational quite yet. So the application is still available to us. So yeah, and there was a question from Peter as to whether we can see what others have bid. Oh, no. We can see what somebody bid, because the price then gets set at the highest bid that takes the cumulative bids below that up to that level. So when you see a price at however many pounds and pence, you know that somebody that received that bid at that price, but you don't know which one.
And but once all the CFDs that are awarded, the strike price for every single CFD is in the public domain. So once you don't find out about the unsuccessful ones, but you do find out about the ones that are awarded, and so they are published. The capacity, the strike price, the expected energization date, all of that stuff and so you can go onto the LCCC website and have a look at all the other CFDs that have been awarded by technology, and yeah, and then they also that's where they inflate them up from the 2012 prices as well. So yeah, they are in the public domain for the ones that are for the winning ones essentially.
Now, I don't know if there's any ballot box shenanigans going on. The independent voting website appears to have crashed for the time being. Our colleagues are desperately trying to refresh, and maybe using a different browser. Linda, if you're hearing me, that might do the trick. You never know. We can confirm that 9,672 emails with giving people the opportunity to vote were sent out, and 4,025 of the members did vote. So that's a turnout of 41%, which is pretty good going. So thank you everybody for being so engaged with what we do. Every now and then I do various things with other cooperative societies, and when I describe to them the level of engagement we have through Ripple co-ops, they are absolutely dumbfounded. They can't believe how passionate people are about what it is that we are doing. So yeah, a 41% voting turnout is very indicative of yeah, how people feel about Ripple and the opportunity here. It sounds like the voting website is really not playing tonight. I think he says there is quite a significant crash, that nothing's happening. So Sarah, should we just offer to email all the members, perhaps? As soon as we are able to get the votes in. We've contacted the administrators of the website, and nothing comes through yet. It's been an urgent support ticket.
But yeah, so tomorrow we will share this video as well and the results. And yeah, so and somebody asked what the Kirkhill results were. That was 30% in favour, 68% against it, and 2% abstained. So yeah, Kirkhill Co-op decided not to apply for CFD for the co-op funded share. So we will let you know.
We'll let you know as soon as we can. Yeah.
And so apologies for not being able to share it tonight. We are disappointed as well, but yeah, we'll let you know as soon as possible by email. So do keep checking your
I'm seeing one more message is being another message was going up that is also not favorable.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we'll let you know tomorrow. But yeah, thank you for joining tonight. It's very much appreciated. Hi, I'm really pleased to announce the results of the Derril Water CfD vote. We weren't able to share the results at the meeting because there was a problem, the site crashed. We weren't able to access the votes, but the platform has been fantastic in getting us the votes. So I can reveal that the results of the vote are that 62% of people voted against progressing a CFD, 35% were in favour of the co-op funded share applying for a CFD, and 2% of people abstained. So that means that the co-op funded share of Derril Water will not be progressing a CFD application any further. But I want to thank everyone on behalf of Ripple, and also I'm sure on behalf of the Derril Water Co-op directors. I want to thank everyone for being so engaged, for coming along, voting, listening to the debate on both sides. Really, really amazing to see such a high level of engagement from members. So thank you. But yeah, the vote results are that the 62% of people voted to not progress a CFD. So there will not be a CFD being progressed any further for the co-op funded share of Derril Water. Thank you.